Picture this. It is 3 in the morning, the kind of darkness that swallows everything whole. You are asleep in your bed, safe in your home, surrounded by the people you love. The doors are locked. The windows are shut. You have done everything right. And yet somewhere outside, a truck engine goes silent. Heavy boots hit the pavement. A figure moves through the shadows, carrying a knife with a blade longer than your forearm. He has been watching you, not for minutes, not for hours, for days, maybe weeks. He knows when you sleep, he knows when you wake, he knows which window has the broken latch. And tonight, he has decided that you will not see tomorrow. This is not a horror movie, this is not fiction. This is the true story of Adam Leroy Lane, a long-haul truck driver who turned America's highways into his personal hunting ground. A predator who used his profession as the perfect cover, moving from state to state, leaving a trail of terror and death behind him. He was invisible in plain sight, just another trucker at just another rest stop, just another face in the rear-view mirror, until 2 teenage girls decided they were not going to be victims, until they fought back. I need you to understand something before we go any further. The story I am about to tell you is not easy to hear. It contains moments of genuine horror, of violence, of the darkest corners of human capability. But it also contains something else, something more important. It contains courage. It contains survival. It contains the kind of ordinary heroism that reminds us why we tell these stories in the first place. Because in the end, evil does not win. In the end, the monster gets caught. But how we get there, the path we walk together over these next chapters, that is where the real truth lives. If you're watching this right now, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button, share this video. Not for me. For the victims whose stories deserve to be heard, for the families who lived through nightmares we cannot imagine, for the survivors who fought back when every instinct told them to freeze. Their courage deserves an audience. Be part of that audience. Now let me take you back. Back to a time before anyone knew his name. Back to when Adam Leroy Lane was just another truck driver logging thousands of miles across the American landscape, anonymous and unremarkable. Back to when the highways were his kingdom and the darkness was his ally. Adam Leroy Lane was born in 1964, a child of the working class, raised in the kind of environment that leaves scars you cannot see. Little is publicly known about his early years, but what we do know is this. Somewhere along the way, something broke inside him. Or maybe it was never whole to begin with. Maybe the darkness was always there, waiting, growing, feeding on whatever twisted impulses lived in the depths of his mind. He became a truck driver in the 1990s, and for a while, he seemed to live a normal life. He got married, he had children, he paid his bills, he showed up to work. From the outside, he was exactly what he appeared to be, a blue-collar American man doing a blue-collar American job. But inside, something else was happening, something was building, something was waiting for its moment to emerge. The trucking life suited him perfectly. Think about it. You're given a vehicle that weighs 40,000 pounds. You're given a schedule that takes you across state lines, through dozens of jurisdictions, past countless small towns where no one knows your face. You are paid to be invisible. You are paid to disappear. For most truck drivers, this is simply the nature of the job. Long hours, lonely roads, the endless ribbon of highway unspooling before your headlights. But for someone like Adam Lane, someone with darkness in his heart, the trucking life was something else entirely. It was opportunity. We will never know exactly when he started hunting. We will never know how many times he watched from the shadows before he finally decided to act. Serial predators rarely announce themselves. They escalate gradually, testing boundaries, building courage, learning from their mistakes. What we do know is that by 2007, Adam Lane had perfected his method. He had become something truly terrifying. A predator with a perfect cover story. A killer who could strike anywhere, anytime, and then simply drive away into the night. His truck became his base of operations. Inside, he kept his tools, knives, weapons, things designed for one purpose and one purpose only. He studied his targets, he watched their homes, he waited for the perfect moment. And then, when the darkness was deep enough and the world was asleep, he made his move. The question that haunts me, the question that haunts everyone who studies these cases, is simple. How do you stop someone like this? How do you catch a ghost? How do you find a needle in a haystack when the needle keeps moving, keeps changing, keeps disappearing into the endless maze of American highways? The answer, as it turned out, came from the most unexpected place imaginable. It came from two teenage girls in a quiet New Jersey town. It came from a moment of impossible courage in the face of unimaginable fear. But before we get there, before we reach that pivotal night, we need to understand what came before. We need to walk through the darkness that Adam Lane created. We need to honor the victims who did not survive. The summer of 2007 was hot, the kind of heat that shimmers off the pavement, that makes the air thick and heavy, that keeps people indoors with their air conditioners humming and their windows locked. Across the eastern United States, life went on as it always does. People went to work. Children played in sprinklers. Families gathered for barbecues. And somewhere on the highways, Adam Leroy Lane was hunting. His first confirmed victim was Monica Massaro. She was 41 years old, a mother, a wife, a woman with a full life and a future stretching out before her. She lived in Bloomsbury, New Jersey, in a quiet home on a quiet street, the kind of place where nothing bad ever happens. Until it did. It was July 29th, 2007. The night was dark and still. Monica's husband was away, working the night shift, leaving her alone in the house. She had no reason to be afraid. This was her home, her sanctuary, the place where she was supposed to be safe. Adam Lane had been watching her. We know this now. He had studied her routines, her schedule, the patterns of her life. He knew when she would be alone. He knew how to get in. And on that hot July night, he made his move. And the details of what happened inside that house are difficult to speak about. What I can tell you is this. Monica Massaro was stabbed to death in her own bedroom. The violence was brutal, purposeful, the work of someone who had thought about this moment, planned for it, savored the anticipation of it. When her husband came home from work, he found her body. His screams shattered the morning silence. The police arrived. They processed the scene. They gathered evidence. But here is the thing about Adam Lane's crimes. He did not leave much behind. He was careful, methodical. He wore gloves. He controlled what he touched. And when he was done, he simply walked back to his truck and drove away. By the time the sun rose over Bloomsbury, New Jersey, Adam Leroy Lane could have been in any one of a dozen states. The investigation had a crime scene but no suspect, evidence but no face to attach it to. Monica Massaro's murder became another file in another folder, a tragedy without resolution. But Adam Lane was not finished. The darkness inside him had tasted blood and it wanted more. Just 2 days later, on July 31st, he struck again. This time his target was Darlene Ewalt, a 38-year-old woman living in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. Notice the similarity in the names of the towns. Bloomsbury, New Jersey. Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. I do not believe this was coincidence. I believe Adam Lane had a type, a pattern, a twisted logic that guided his hunting. Or perhaps he simply found dark humor in the symmetry. Darlene Ewalt was also alone when he came for her. Her husband was also working nights. The parallels are chilling. Adam Lane had found a formula, a method that worked, and he was using it again and again. He was escalating, growing bolder, more confident with each successful attack. Darlene was stabbed to death in her bedroom. The violence was identical to what had happened to Monica Massaro. Same method, same brutality, same careful attention to leaving nothing behind. When the police arrived, they found another crime scene, another grieving family, another case with no obvious suspect. 2 women dead in 3 days, 2 homes invaded, 2 families destroyed. And the killer was a ghost, a shadow, a man who could be anywhere and nowhere at the same time. The investigations proceeded independently. Different states, different jurisdictions, different detectives. In 2007, communication between law enforcement agencies was improving, but it was not perfect. The connection between Monica Massaro's murder and Darlene Ewalt's murder was not immediately apparent. They were just 2 tragedies in 2 towns, separated by state lines and bureaucratic boundaries. Adam Lane, meanwhile, was already planning his next attack. He was in his truck, moving down the highway, invisible among the endless stream of commercial vehicles that keep America running. He was looking for his next target, his next victim, an opportunity to unleash the darkness that lived inside him. I want to stop here for a moment. I want you to think about something. Right now, as you watch this video, there are millions of trucks on American highways. Millions. The vast majority of truck drivers are exactly what they appear to be. Hardworking men and women doing difficult jobs, spending long hours away from their families to keep the economy moving. But every system has its vulnerabilities. Every profession has its shadows. And the trucking industry, with its transient nature and its interstate mobility, has long been recognized as a potential cover for those with dark intentions. Since 2004, the FBI has operated the Highway Serial Killings Initiative, a program specifically designed to identify and track patterns of violence along America's highways. The data they have gathered is sobering. Over 500 cases have been linked to this phenomenon. 500. And those are just the ones we know about. I am not telling you this to frighten you. I am telling you this because understanding the scope of the problem is the first step towards solving it. Adam Leroy Lane was not unique. He was just one predator among many who have used the highways as their hunting ground. But his story, his eventual capture, offers lessons we need to learn. Let me ask you something. Think about it and leave a comment below. If you discovered that a stranger had been watching your home, studying your routines, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, what would you do? How would you protect yourself and your family? What would it take for you to feel safe again? In the days following the murders of Monica Massaro and Darlene Ewalt, a strange silence settled over the investigations. The police did their work. They interviewed neighbors. They canvassed the areas. They searched for connections, for witnesses, for any thread they could pull. But Adam Lane had planned too carefully. He had left too little behind. And every hour that passed, he moved further away, lost in the endless flow of highway traffic. I think about this often. I think about how easy it must have seemed to him, how simple the formula appeared. Find a target, watch them, wait for isolation, strike in the darkness, drive away. The American highway system, that marvel of engineering that connects our communities and powers our economy, had become his accomplice. The very infrastructure designed to bring us together was helping a predator move between his hunting grounds. But here is what Adam Lane didn't understand. Here is what predators like him never understand. Their confidence is also their weakness. Every successful attack reinforces their sense of invincibility. Every clean getaway makes them bolder, more reckless. They start to believe they cannot be caught. They start to make mistakes. On the night of August the 1st, 2007, just 2 days after killing Darlene Ewalt, Adam Lane drove his truck into Chelmsford, Massachusetts. He parked. He watched. He found what he was looking for, a home with vulnerable targets, a house where he could act out his violent fantasies yet again. Inside that home lived a woman and her 15-year-old daughter. Their names are not widely reported, and I will respect their privacy here. What I will tell you is that they were asleep when Adam Lane entered their home sometime after midnight. He had his knife. He had his purpose. He believed this would be another successful hunt. The mother woke first. She heard something, a sound that did not belong. The creak of a floorboard, the whisper of movement in the darkness. Every parent knows this feeling. That primal alertness that snaps you from sleep to full consciousness in an instant. Something is wrong. Your child is in danger. She found Adam Lane standing in her home, a stranger, an intruder, a man with a knife. In that moment, she made a choice that would define the rest of her life. She did not freeze. She did not plead. She fought. The attack was violent and chaotic. Adam Lane stabbed her multiple times, wounding her severely. But she would not stop fighting. She screamed. She struggled. She did everything in her power to draw attention, to wake her daughter, to survive. Her daughter heard the commotion. She woke to the sound of her mother's screams. And then she saw him, the stranger, the knife, the blood. In that moment of absolute terror, this 15-year-old girl made her own choice. She ran for the phone and called 911. That call, that single act of courage in the face of unimaginable fear, it changed everything. The police response was immediate. Officers raced to the scene, lights and sirens cutting through the quiet suburban night. Adam Lane heard them coming. His confidence evaporated. His careful planning meant nothing now. The game had changed. He fled. He ran from the house, away from his injured victim, away from the girl on the phone, back toward his truck. But the police were already setting up a perimeter. They had descriptions. They had a direction. And for the first time in his murderous spree, Adam Leroy Lane was running scared. The mother survived. Let me say that again because it matters. The mother survived. She suffered severe injuries. She faced a long and painful recovery. But she lived. She lived because she fought. She lived because her daughter was brave enough to act when every instinct must have told her to hide. But Adam Lane was not caught that night. Not yet. He managed to slip through the perimeter to reach his truck, to disappear once again into the maze of highways. The police had evidence now. They had witnesses. They had a description. But the ghost was still moving, still hunting, still dangerous. The investigation intensified. Now they knew they were dealing with a serial predator. The connection between the Massachusetts attack and the earlier murders became clear. Law enforcement agencies began to share information, to coordinate their efforts, to build a profile of the man they were hunting. They knew he was a truck driver. The evidence made this clear. They knew he targeted women alone in their homes. They knew he struck at night. They knew he was organized, careful, and extremely dangerous. But knowing these things and catching him were two different challenges entirely. America's highways stretch for millions of miles. Millions. There are hundreds of trucking companies, hundreds of thousands of individual drivers. Finding one man in that ocean of commerce and mobility seemed almost impossible. But the investigators had something they did not have before. They had momentum. They had communication between jurisdictions. And they had something else too. They had luck. The strange, unpredictable luck that sometimes tips the scales in favor of justice. It was August 4th, 2007. Less than a week had passed since Monica Massaro's murder. In that short span of time, Adam Lane had killed 2 women, brutally attacked a third, and terrorized an entire region. Law enforcement was scrambling. Families were locking their doors with extra care. The news was filled with warnings about a predator who could strike anywhere. And Adam Lane, despite his close call in Massachusetts, was hunting again. He drove his truck into Bloomfield, New Jersey, another quiet town, another suburban neighborhood, another collection of homes where families believed they were safe. He was drawn back to New Jersey, to the state where he had claimed his first victim. Perhaps he felt comfortable there. Perhaps he was compelled by some twisted sense of unfinished business. Or perhaps he simply did not care anymore, driven by urges too powerful to control. He found a house. He watched it. Inside lived a family, parents and their 2 daughters, both teenagers. The older daughter was 17. The younger was 15. They were just kids. High school students with normal lives and normal dreams. They had no idea that a monster had chosen their home. In the early hours of August 5th, Adam Lane made his move. He entered the house through a window, moving quietly through the darkness, knife in hand. He was confident. He had done this before. He knew how to move, how to strike, how to take what he wanted. He entered the bedroom where the 2 teenage girls were sleeping. What happened next is something I want you to really understand. Something I want you to carry with you. Because in this moment, 2 ordinary teenage girls became extraordinary. They became heroes. The older sister woke first. She saw the shadow. She saw the knife. She saw death standing at the foot of her bed. And in that fraction of a second, she made a choice that would save her life and her sister's life. She screamed. Not a whimper, not a gasp, a full-throated primal scream that shattered the silence and woke everyone in the house. Adam Lane lunged. He swung his knife. He cut her. But she did not stop fighting. The younger sister woke to chaos, to screaming, to the unthinkable sight of a stranger attacking her sister. And she fought too. Both girls fought. They kicked. They scratched. They screamed. They refused to be victims. Their father heard the commotion. He came running. When he saw what was happening in his daughter's bedroom, he became something primordial, something beyond ordinary human capability. A father protecting his children. Adam Lane, the highway predator who had killed without consequence, who had terrorized without resistance, found himself facing something he had not planned for. A family that would not submit. Victims who became warriors. The father attacked Lane with everything he had. The struggle was violent and desperate. Lane slashed with his knife, wounding the father multiple times. But the man would not stop. Could not stop. His daughter's lives were at stake, and nothing else mattered. In the chaos, someone called 911. Again, that single act, that reaching for the phone, changed everything. Police arrived within minutes. They found Adam Lane still in the house, still fighting, still trying to complete his sick mission. But this time, there was no escape. This time, the perimeter held. This time, the monster was caught. They arrested him in that house, surrounded by the family he had tried to destroy. They found his truck parked nearby. Inside, they found evidence that connected him to crimes across multiple states. Knives, maps, records, the tools of his trade. Adam Leroy Lane's reign of terror was over. The two teenage girls survived. The father survived. Yes, there were injuries. Yes, there was trauma. But there was also something else. There was victory. There was justice. There was proof that courage can overcome evil, that fighting back matters, that the monsters do not always win. With Adam Lane in custody, the real work began. Investigators needed to understand who he was, what he had done, and whether there were more victims they did not yet know about. The man they had arrested seemed unremarkable on the surface. 42 years old, married with children, a truck driver for a transportation company based in Jonestown, Pennsylvania. He had a commercial driver's license and a relatively clean record. No obvious red flags that would have marked him as a serial predator. But beneath that ordinary surface lurked something twisted. As investigators dug into his life, they discovered that Adam Lane had maintained two separate existences. In one, he was a husband and father, a working man who provided for his family. In the other, he was a predator, using his trucking roots as a map of opportunity, seeking vulnerable targets in the communities he passed through. His truck told part of the story. Inside, they found multiple knives, including the weapon used in the attacks. They found dark clothing designed for stealth. They found evidence of meticulous planning, of routes carefully chosen, of time spent watching and waiting. The forensic evidence began to pile up. DNA from the crime scenes matched. Witness descriptions aligned. The timeline of his trucking routes corresponded with the locations and dates of the attacks. There was no doubt. Adam Leroy Lane was their man. But here is what haunted investigators then and what haunts researchers now. Was this the complete picture? How many other crimes had Adam Lane committed that remained unsolved? How many other victims were out there, their cases going cold, their families never receiving answers? The FBI's Highway Serial Killings Initiative took a hard look at Lane's history. They mapped his trucking routes over the years. They cross-referenced unsolved homicides along those routes. The results were disturbing. While no additional murders were conclusively proven, the patterns suggested possibilities that will never be fully resolved. This is the dark mathematics of serial predation. For every case we solve, there may be others we never know about. For every killer we catch, there may be crimes that remain mysteries forever. Adam Lane was active for years before 2007. His level of planning and execution suggested experience. The question of whether Monica Massaro and Darlene Ewalt were truly his first victims will likely never be answered with certainty. What we do know is this: the attacks in July and August of 2007 were escalating in frequency and boldness. He killed on July 29th. He killed again on July 31st. He attacked on August 1st. He attempted to kill again on August 5th. 4 attacks in 8 days. He was losing control, driven by compulsions that were accelerating beyond his ability to manage them. This pattern is well documented in criminal psychology. Serial predators often begin with long cooling-off periods between crimes. But as they continue, those periods shrink. The need grows. The hunger intensifies. They take greater risks. They become more reckless. And eventually they make the mistake that leads to their capture. For Adam Lane, that mistake was attacking the family in Bloomfield, New Jersey. He underestimated them. He assumed they would be like his other victims, isolated, vulnerable, unable to resist. He could not have been more wrong. I think about those 2 teenage girls often. I think about the choice they made in that moment of terror. They could have frozen. They could have submitted. They could have done what their attacker expected. Instead, they fought. They screamed. They woke their father. They changed the ending of the story. This is why we tell these stories. Not to glorify violence, not to sensationalize tragedy, but to celebrate the human capacity for courage, to honor those who fight back, to remind ourselves that we are not helpless in the face of evil. The legal process that followed Adam Lane's arrest was methodical and comprehensive. Multiple states had claims on him. Multiple families deserved justice. The challenge for prosecutors was to build cases that would ensure he never walked free again. New Jersey moved first. The evidence was strongest there. The attack on the Bloomfield family had multiple surviving witnesses who could identify Lane. The DNA evidence was conclusive, and the weapons recovered from his truck matched the wounds inflicted on the victims. Adam Leroy Lane was charged with attempted murder, armed burglary, and weapons offenses in connection with the Bloomfield attack. He faced the reality of his situation: overwhelming evidence, multiple witnesses, and a public demanding accountability. In 2008, Lane pleaded guilty to the New Jersey charges. It was not an admission born of remorse. It was a calculation. The evidence against him was insurmountable. A trial would only make things worse. By pleading guilty, he avoided the possibility of the death penalty, but he ensured that he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. He was sentenced to 50 years in New Jersey, with a mandatory minimum of 25 years before any possibility of parole. But New Jersey was not the end. Pennsylvania and Massachusetts had their own charges to pursue. In Pennsylvania, Lane was charged with the murder of Darlene Ewalt. Again, the evidence was conclusive. DNA, timeline, method, all of it pointed directly to him. In 2012, Lane pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. The sentence was life in prison without the possibility of parole. Massachusetts charged him with the attack that had wounded but not killed. Lane pleaded guilty there as well, adding more years to a sentence that had already become effectively permanent. The total weight of justice was crushing. Multiple life sentences. Multiple state prison systems with claims on his time. Adam Leroy Lane would never be free again. He would die in prison, surrounded by walls and guards and the knowledge of what he had done. For the families of Monica Massaro and Darlene Ewalt, the verdicts brought a measure of closure, not healing, closure, and healing are different things. The women they loved were gone forever. No verdict could change that. But knowing that the man responsible would spend his remaining days in a cell, that he would never hunt again, that he would never claim another victim, that meant something. For the survivors, the families in Massachusetts and New Jersey who had fought back and won, the verdicts were affirmation. They had done the right thing. Their courage had mattered. Their resistance had not only saved their own lives, but had led to the capture of a serial predator who would have continued killing indefinitely. Every tragedy teaches us something, if we are willing to learn. The case of Adam Leroy Lane illuminated vulnerabilities in our systems, gaps in our awareness, and strengths in our capacity to fight back. First, the trucking industry. In the years following Lane's arrest, there were renewed calls for better screening of commercial drivers, for more rigorous background checks, for systems that could flag concerning patterns in behavior or route selection. Some of these reforms were implemented, others were not. The industry remains a challenging environment for oversight, with its transient workforce and interstate nature. Second, law enforcement cooperation. The Lane case highlighted both the weaknesses and the potential of cross-jurisdictional communication. The early murders in New Jersey and Pennsylvania were not immediately connected because the investigations were happening in different states. It was only after the Massachusetts attack, when investigators began actively sharing information, that the pattern became clear. Since then, databases and communication systems have improved. The FBI's Highway Serial Killings Initiative has become more robust, but there is always more work to do. Third, and perhaps most importantly, personal awareness and resistance. Adam Lane chose his victims based on vulnerability, women alone, homes with accessible entry points, targets who seemed unlikely to fight back. The survivors who defeated him did so by defying his expectations. They fought, they screamed, they called for help. They did not accept the role of victim. I am not suggesting that surviving an attack like this is simply a matter of will. Violence is chaotic and unpredictable. People respond differently in crisis situations, and there is no guaranteed formula for survival. But the evidence is clear. Resistance often works. Fighting back, even when the odds seem impossible, often changes outcomes. The Lane case is proof of this. The two teenage girls in Bloomfield did not have special training. They did not have weapons. They had each other. And they had the determination to survive. That was enough. Their father did not have special skills. He was an ordinary man who loved his children. When the moment came, that love became strength. That strength became action. That action saved lives. This is the lesson of Adam Leroy Lane. Not that evil exists, we know that. Not that predators walk among us, we know that too. The lesson is that courage matters, that fighting back matters, that ordinary people in extraordinary moments can become heroes. Today, Adam Leroy Lane sits in a prison cell. He will be there until he dies. The highways that were once his hunting ground are now just memories, images glimpsed through barred windows, freedoms he will never experience again. But this story does not belong to him. It never did. This story belongs to the people he tried to destroy and to the communities that came together to bring him to justice. Monica Massaro and Darlene Ewalt are gone. Their lives were stolen by a man who saw them as objects, as opportunities, as prey. But they were so much more than that. They were mothers, daughters, wives, friends. They They had stories of their own, dreams of their own, futures that should have stretched out before them. We remember them not as victims, but as people, whole people, people who deserved better. The survivors carry scars, both visible and invisible. The road to recovery from trauma like this is long and winding. There are good days and bad days. There are moments of triumph and moments of struggle. But they are still here, still fighting, still moving forward. Their survival is itself a victory, a testament to human resilience, a reminder that the monsters do not get the final word. The two teenage girls from Bloomfield are adults now. They have had years to process what happened to them, to integrate that terrible night into lives that have continued to grow and change. I do not know the specifics of their journeys. Their privacy is their own. But I know this: they are survivors. They are heroes. The choice they made in that moment of darkness, the choice to fight, rippled outward in ways they could never have imagined. Because they fought, Adam Lane was caught. Because they screamed, police arrived in time. Because they refused to be victims, a serial predator was stopped before he could claim more lives. The women who might have been his future targets, women who will never know how close they came to danger, are alive because two teenage girls were brave. This is how we defeat evil, not with speeches or theories, but with action, not with grand gestures, but with small acts of courage that accumulate into something powerful. Every person who fights back, every witness who speaks up, every community that refuses to look away becomes part of the solution. The highways are still out there. Millions of miles of road, connecting our cities and towns, carrying the commerce that keeps our society running. Most of the people who travel those roads are exactly what they appear to be: workers, families, travelers, ordinary Americans living ordinary lives. But the shadows are still out there too. The predators, the hunters, the monsters who wear human faces. We cannot live in fear. That is not the lesson here. The lesson is awareness. The lesson is preparation. The lesson is the knowledge that when darkness comes, we have the power to fight it. Lock your doors. Trust your instincts. Know your neighbors. Pay attention to what does not belong. And if the worst happens, if you find yourself facing something you never imagined, remember the teenage girls in Bloomfield. Remember that courage is a choice. Remember that fighting back matters. Adam Leroy Lane thought he was a hunter. He thought the highways made him invisible. He thought his victims would be easy prey. He was wrong about all of it. And now he sits in a cell growing old, waiting for death, knowing that his story ended not with his triumph, but with his defeat. The families he shattered have rebuilt as much as such rebuilding is possible. The communities he terrorized have healed. The law enforcement officers who caught him have moved on to other cases, other battles, other monsters. But the lesson remains: evil is real. It walks among us. It wears ordinary faces and drives ordinary vehicles and lives ordinary lives. But goodness is real too. Courage is real. The human capacity to fight, to resist, to refuse to be victims, that is real. And in the end, that is what defeats the darkness. This is the story of Adam Leroy Lane, the highway trucker, predator. It is a story of horror and tragedy. But it is also a story of heroism and justice. It is a story that ends not with the monster's victory, but with his capture, his conviction, his consignment to a cage where he will spend the rest of his days. Remember the names: Remember Monica Massaro. Remember Darlene Ewalt. Remember the survivors who fought back. Remember that their courage made a difference. And the next time you see a truck on the highway, remember this. Most of them are just trucks. Most of them are driven by ordinary people doing ordinary jobs. But some shadows are darker than others. Some monsters wear human faces. And the only way to defeat them is to be ready, to be aware, and to be willing to fight. If this story has meant something to you, if it has made you think, if it has reminded you that courage matters, then share it. Subscribe to this channel. Help us reach more people with more stories that matter. Because these stories need to be told. These victims need to be remembered. These survivors need to be honored. Thank you for staying with me through these 8 chapters. Thank you for bearing witness to the darkness and the light. Thank you for being part of the audience that these stories deserve. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware. And never forget that ordinary people can become heroes.